Welcome and thanks for taking the time to join us today. I'm Charlie Imbergamo, Director of Strategic Programs for the Nonprofit Leadership Center. Our NLC team is continuing our commitment to develop and connect leaders across the region to strengthen our communities, albeit in this new virtual reality. 10 weeks into a new normal for us, we find ourselves, like you, navigating the waters of virtual work, trying to keep morale and high-spirited, balancing productivity, and supporting home and personal needs. Today's webinar comes at a time when we're now contemplating the duration of these arrangements and what it will look like to continue our current commitments and to thrive in this new normal. It's an honor for us to welcome you to this virtual space today for today's webinar, Motivating and Engaging Employees Virtually. To recognize and celebrate the organizations you represent, we'd ask you to locate the chat box and to type the name of your organization in the chat right now. As we see the names of the organizations popping into the feed, take a moment to reflect on the impact and the potential for good in all of these organizations and the great good done in our community because of you. We're joined in this work today by Margarita Sarmiento. Margarita has over 25 years of management, training, and facilitation experience. She's very well known at NLC. Her training encompasses professional development, team building, leadership and board engagement, organizational planning, cross-cultural communication, and diversity. She's worked in corporate management as a trainer and successfully consults and trains in a variety of industries. Margarita is a graduate of Florida State University, where she received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Communications. She currently resides in Tampa. Margarita will be teaching 2 classes in our virtual classroom in June, managing across the generations and dealing effectively with conflict and stress. Those things may resonate with some of us these days. Please check out our website to register for those if you have interest. Our virtual classroom has become very informative, engaging, and fun. Moderating our call is my teammate, colleague, Karina Kletter, NLC's program associate. Karina has been absolutely instrumental in driving this work and this pivot to virtual. We simply couldn't do it without her. I'm grateful for her commitment to the work and to each of you and to our sector. She will take us through some rules of the road for our time together. Karina.
Thank you, Charlie, and welcome everybody to the webinar. Just a few rules of the road. To minimize background noise and distractions, all lines will be muted for the duration of the webinar. The session is being recorded and will be available on our website for future viewing. We warmly welcome your questions. Please type them in the chat box as they come up for you, and we'll take 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation to answer as many as we're able to get to. If you haven't found the chat box yet, go to the settings at the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on chat. We're looking forward to a productive, engaging session, and thank you so much for participating. Take it away, Margarita.
Charlie, and definitely thank you so much, Nonprofit Leadership Center, for everything you all are doing right now. I have benefited from going on and watching some of the webinars you've provided, and I know from experience from talking to some of the nonprofit leaders in the area that what you're doing, and especially how quickly you all jumped on to support agencies and support organizations during this time has been very, very helpful. So Moving into that, this time we find ourselves in, it is amazing to me that Charlie said 9 weeks, and I was just like amazed that we can be here, right? Because I think many of us thought at the beginning, oh, a couple of weeks, then maybe a month, and here we are in a totally different place than we expected even last week. But the truth is that where we are is what we have to deal with, and we still want to be the best leaders we can be. And that is really what this webinar is about. I want to talk for a moment just about remote teams and what we mean when we talk about remote teams, because remote teams aren't new. You know, remote teams, some of you manage remote teams even before this started. What is it that makes managing, motivating, and engaging people on the remote teams that we're dealing with today so different from the remote teams from before? Well, the typical challenges in dealing with a remote team for managers, a lot of managers believe that workers are less productive or less effective and efficient when they're working remotely. You know, studies proven that that is not necessarily true, but I think that sometimes that disconnect makes us feel uncomfortable as leaders. Employees struggle when they're working remotely, sometimes with not having support, immediate support from their leader, immediate support from their coworkers, and even connection to their resources, or they feel like they are out of the loop in the communication that is going on back at the office. But today, it's a little bit different. And the reason is because everyone has fallen into this. And so a lot of people that are working remotely are in those situations, not because they chose to be, or because they prepared a place at home to do this, but because they had to. And as a result, we don't have the infrastructure in place to maintain what I like to call the mothership while people are working remotely that they can always come back to. And even the mothership is now kind of floating in space. And so when we look at today's struggles, we have location, we have the environment people are in with animals and pets and spouses and kids, and up until this week, many of them trying to educate children at the same time. So all of that and the anxiety of the situation that we're in adds to really the challenge that you as a leader have in getting these employees to be connected, to be motivated, and to engage and produce at the level you still need them to produce while taking care of them. Because I know for a fact that you are here because you care about your workforce. You care about your employees. You care about the decisions that have to be made. And so you want to do the best you can for them. So really what we're going to be talking about today, 3 main areas. The first one is we're going to look at some critical areas that affect team morale and are affecting motivation today because of the situation we find ourselves in. We are going to look at specific ways to engage team members and to strengthen their relationships with each other, but also with you as their manager. And then the last thing we're going to look at, and because we are moving into a place now where there might be some transition going on with some of your organizations, how to help your team to transition into a new reality that's going to be coming. And even that new reality is going to continually be changing because we're still not sure of what things are going to look like. And what we have to understand is that we are not going back to the way it was before. Even physically, it's not going to be able to be that way. So what can we do to help them transition smoother as we get into that? So let's start by looking at how we can maintain team morale and motivation. And I want to look at 3 key areas in maintaining team morale and motivation. The first critical area that I want to talk about is in communication, because quite frankly, anyone that knows me, I know some of you have been in some of my trainings in the past, this is one of my anchors, right? Communication is the foundation of a lot of the misunderstandings that happen. Communication is much to blame for some of the drama that goes on sometimes in our workplaces. And communication also is what really connects and keeps people working together as a team. And if you really want a vital team, a team that is working synergistically with one another, communication is going to be one of the key points that you need to pay attention to. So we're going to look at communication. The second thing is the connection. And connection is relationship. And again, if you know me, I talk about relationship all the time. People do more for people they have relationship with. People step out of their comfort zone for people they have relationship with. And people forgive more from people they have relationship with. And I don't know about you, but I know that even in the last few weeks, I've needed to have forgiveness from some people that I have, without even intentionally come across in a way that I didn't want to come across with. So that connection is going to help a lot in making sure that things are going to go smoothly. And then the last thing that we're going to look at is really commitment. And commitment has to do with the individual's desire to be present, the individual's desire to connect with the work and your mission. Because really, if they're not connected to the mission, in the olden days, commitment was about waking up in the morning and kind of having a sore throat and thinking, oh, I don't really feel like going to work today. And if they really have that commitment and that connection to mission, they're going to say to themselves, yeah, but if I don't go into work today, XYZ isn't going to get done, and you know, so-and-so is going to have to do this. And that commitment to their team and to the organization and to the mission is what's going to get them out of bed. Well, today, even more so, we need to have that there, because they don't have that face-to-face connection with the people that they had in the past. So let's start by looking at this whole idea of communication. And as we look at communication, we understand that there are three main areas that affect our communication. And every message that we send has these three areas in them. The first one is the words that we use, okay? That's the verbal part of our communication. Secondly, we're looking at the tone of voice. And you can use the exact same words and use a different tone of voice, and you're going to send a completely different message. If I say to you, good morning, or if I say, good morning, I am sending two completely different messages, even though the words are exactly the same. So our words, our tone of voice, and the last thing is our body language, our physiology, really, the eye contact, what we're doing with our hands. Can you tell I'm Cuban? I use my hands all the time. How close we stand to somebody, all of those things come into play into our communication also. So as we look at these three things, which one do you think carries the most weight in a communication? Real quickly, if you can, just type into the chat, out of these things, which one carries the most weight? Just guess, take a guess. What do you think? And Karina, I'm having trouble seeing the chat, so you might have to tell me what you're seeing. What are most people saying?
I'm seeing a lot of body language.
Okay, good. Body language.
Some tone. Now it looks like equal between body language and tone.
Tone of voice and body language.
Some votes for words.
Okay. So not uncommon, you know, a lot of times people are split. We tend to fall closer to body language and tone of voice. I think that a lot of people do that. I will tell you, the people that do that are the ones who get in trouble sometimes for their tone of voice, me being one of them that would vote for tone of voice. But the truth is that in our communication, our body language carries 55% of the message. 55% of the message is being relayed through our body language. 38% is coming from our tone of voice, which some of you are math geniuses out there. You already know that that leaves only about 7% for your words. Now, as you look at that, I want you to think about all the different ways that we communicate with our coworkers and with our teams as managers and as leaders, and how much control you have over these three areas. In a face-to-face communication, in a meeting, face-to-face meeting, or in a face-to-face one-on-one, what do we have control over here? All three. You have control over the words you use, you have control over your tone of voice, and you have control over your body language. Now, we may not always take control, but we absolutely have control. Now, let's back it down a little and think about a phone call. How much control do we have in a phone call over these three things? Well, in a phone call, you lose body language completely. Unless you're FaceTiming, you might get a little bit of body language, but even a FaceTime call or a Zoom meeting does not give you the same amount of body language messaging that you do face-to-face and in person. So in a phone call, the only thing you really have control over are the words you use and your tone of voice. But let's look at the form of communication that is quickly becoming the most popular form of communication in the workplace. And one of the reasons is, you know, I'm a shameless commercial for the upcoming training I'm doing in June. But a lot of this has to do with our generations, our younger generations. Their brains are wired to pick up on and process things visually and electronically. And so our electronic communication, our written communication is quickly becoming one of our most used forms of communication in the workplace today. And I would imagine today, even in your workplaces with people working from home, you're still counting on electronic communication a lot. What do you have control over in your electronic communication? When you're emailing, when you're texting, when you're using chat, some of you have inner office type chat programs. The only thing you have control over in written communication is your words. That's it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Don't even go there. I have to say this. Emojis are not professional. Emojis are not professional. I had a person I was coaching once, and we were talking in a meeting I had with him, and we were talking about an issue he was going on with one of his coworkers, and this back and forth they were going with electronically, and he was showing me some of the emails that were going back and forth, and he said, "She should have known I was kidding. I put a winky face." Really? We do not have control over tone in an email. You can only control tone and body language in your email through your words, through the words you use. And it really is about thinking before you communicate. Think before you communicate. So instead of just saying, "Charlie, I need those numbers by the end of the day," saying, "Good morning, Charlie. Wanted to remind you I need the numbers by the end of the day. Thanks so much." Or let me know if you have a problem with that. Whatever, it takes 2 more seconds. But let me tell you, the message, depending, because who controls the tone? An email has tone. Who controls the tone? The reader. The reader controls the tone based on what they're going through. Now let's put this in the context of where we are today. See, in a normal office setting where people might be working side by side with one another, you see that so-and-so's having a bad day. And when you get that email from her that just says, "I need your numbers by the end of the day," you might say, "She's having a bad day. She's in a hurry. She's running around trying to do 3 things at once. You know, I can understand. She probably sent me this from her phone as she was running to her meeting." But when you are working isolated and you get that email, depending on what's going on around you, you may read tone into that email that doesn't belong in that email. And so that's why communication is so important, that we look at that when we are managing these remote teams, doing as much as we can to ease communication for your team members. So I want to cover 3 specific areas that I notice as we look at communication. The first one is you want to have as much video interaction as possible. You want to connect with people as much as you can face to face. And yes, I already said it's not the same as being in front of them, but it definitely gives you a little more connection. I was just sharing with Charlie and Karina as we were waiting that I had a board meeting last night with my homeowners. I'm not on the board, but we had a board meeting and they did it over Zoom. And, you know, many of the people were not on the screen. They had their video turned off of the Zoom meeting. And it really made me feel disconnected to the people that were there. And especially in something like a homeowners, that's a great opportunity for people to see each other and connect with one another and see who's talking. So when you see them in the community, when you see them in the street, you can wave to them. It's the same thing with your team. It's the same thing with your team. You want to, as much as possible, at least do team meetings virtually so people can see one another. One-on-ones for sure, try and do them virtually and do them regularly so that there's some kind of systematic structure in place for your team members. And then chat rooms. I have talked to a lot of managers over the last few months that they have the capacity within their organizational, within their video structure to create a chat room that just stays open all day long. It's almost like a virtual break room, and people can just pop into it at any time during the day and see who's in there and chit chat for a couple of minutes and then get back to work. And it's a great way for people to connect with their coworkers. The other thing is that by doing this video interaction, you're going to have an increase in commitment from people and in accountability from them, because it's very different to say over the phone or even in writing that something's going to be done by a certain time. But when you are looking at each other as a team on the screen and you're committing to doing something, getting something to somebody that's going to need it for their part of the project, it will make a big, big difference. The second part of the communication aspect I want to talk about is the informal communication, because this is one area that we do not pay a lot of attention to, and especially right now during this crisis that we are maneuvering, this is a huge loss to your team. We don't realize the amount of weight that casual conversations in the workplace carry when it comes to relationship building and getting things done. And we need to understand that we have to give people an opportunity for that. So maybe 2 months ago, if you had a virtual meeting with people from different areas of the country or people, remote workers, you get to work. As soon as you get on the meeting, you say, hi, everybody, let's get started, and you get going. Today, you need to allow for a little bit more of that office chit chat. Plan for it at the beginning, plan for it at the end. Do some connection with them during that time on personal, not private, but personal happenings. So anything going on in your households, what's going on at your house? Oh, my son had a birthday and his friends drove by and beeped and it was great. Give people a chance to have those conversations, because normally they would be going on in the workplace, and you want people to continue that same level of relationship they had before. The third part, I already talked about it a little bit, is the written communication. We are doing more written communication right now with one another and your team with each other, where before they might have just talked across the office, or they might have just asked someone to bring them something or to send them something when they walked by to go get coffee. Now they're doing a lot more written communication. And so emphasizing to them, making sure that you're reminding them, be as clear and concise as possible. You know, reread what you're saying, proofread it. Don't proofread it just for spelling and grammar, but proofread it for content, making sure that you're not assuming what somebody might think, or that you're continuing a thread of a conversation that you had yesterday with them, and you need to remind them what you're talking about, because you don't know how many other emails this person might be getting. So one of the other things that I want to mention here when it comes to communication is recognizing and understanding that today, many people, when they're working at home, they're just doing this. They're just at their computer working. And so to them, you know, at work, they're working on something and they ask you for something, or they ask a coworker for something, send an email, and then they're doing other things. And, you know, but now they're focused on that. And so the time that they're waiting can drag out. So be more specific about what time. When you say, I'll have that for you by the end of the day, let me tell you, they're waiting for that, because the end of the day is coming. And I don't have anything else to distract me except waiting for that piece that person told me they were sending me. So recognize and understand that, helping them to be more clear and concise around what time can I expect that is a great question to be asking in those situations. So the second aspect that we need to focus on today as we look at motivating and engaging our team members is making sure that that connection is in place. And to me, this is the fun part. This is the fun part of the three, because that connection, the purpose of doing this is because that connection strengthens their relationships. I've already talked about the fact that they kind of feel at odds and they're kind of floating out there. So the relationship piece that they had at work is gone. Not all your work relationships are friendships that you stay in touch with. So I definitely have some friends that I've worked with, and when I'm at home and even during this, they might stay in touch with those people. But there's other people at work that they don't normally talk to away from the office, yet they have strong relationships with them at work. So that connection strengthens that relationship. It builds trust. When you have trust, people are more willing to take risks. That's why connection is so important. You still want your people to trust one another so that your work gets done. Obviously, the communication is going to be facilitated. And when connection exists, critical thinking and creativity is increased. Why? Because people feel safe. People feel safe when there's connection, and they're more willing to think outside the box and bring up things that maybe someone might think that's a stupid idea. So you want to maintain that connection with them. You want to maintain that connection with each other within your team as much as you can during this time. And then the last thing is that when you have connection within a team, it increases productivity because there's a lot of time that is saved. There's a lot of time that is saved that people aren't having to go and double back and, try and cover themselves, because there's this trust that exists within the team that helps us to get things done. So, and also that helping one another happens during that time. So let's look at what we can do, because, I promised you we're going to look at specific things you can do to make these things happen. So let's look at what we can do for the connection. The first thing I would encourage you to do is make your meetings fun. As much as possible, make your meetings fun. Do icebreakers at the beginning of your meeting. I have a friend who I used to work for Progressive, and I was a customer service manager at Progressive, and I have a friend who still works there. She works in HR, and she called me shortly after this happened, and she said, my manager has asked each of us on the team to come up with an icebreaker. And so every meeting we have now on Zoom, we have to do an icebreaker. Do you have one that I could do? And she specifically asked me for one dealing with diversity and generations. And so I helped her develop an icebreaker for that. And it doesn't have to be something that takes up a lot of time. But doing icebreakers, having people share their favorite comfort food. What's the comfort food you're relying on right now? Is it mocha ice cream, or is it baklava that you're having to order from a bakery because you really miss it right now? What is it? The icebreaker I gave her was, everybody pull a coin out. What year is on your coin? Share. That's an icebreaker I do in my generations class. What were you doing during that year? What was important to you that year? Where were you? Where did you live? Just sharing with one another a little bit about your life. So there's quick icebreakers you can do. Also, you can throw in fun activities throughout your meeting. You can toss out trivia. You can toss out, do a scavenger hunt. I have a good friend whose boss does scavenger hunts in the middle of their meetings, and they'll be moving along, and then before they move on to the next section of the meeting, he'll say, okay, first one back with a spatula gets a point. And so they have to run and go grab a spatula. First one back that comes back wearing a funny hat, whatever. And so it keeps the meeting fun, it keeps it engaging, but it doesn't have to take up a lot of time. So doing fun things, and then virtual team activities, actually planning for an activity for your team that you can do virtually to make that connection happen. Activities around interest or hobbies. I recently did a lunch and learn for Habitat, Pinellas and West Pasco here. And as we were waiting for the lunch and learn to begin, a couple of the employees that were on the call or on the training, the Zoom, were chatting about this cooking lesson that was going to be happening the next day on Friday. And that's something that they have set up for their employees. They've brought in different people to do things, like they were doing a cooking lesson. They had done a cooking lesson the week before, and anyone on the team could just pop onto this cooking lesson and see what was going on. And the people had actually gone out and got the groceries. They got a list and they went and bought what was going to be taught. And so they were all going to cook together. So you can do cooking, you can do language. If you have someone on your team that speaks a different language and people on the team are interested in learning it, maybe that's something that you can set up that, once a week for half an hour, 45 minutes, they do some quick, easy phrases people can learn. Yoga, parenting. I put parenting down because I know that a lot of my friends have really been getting a lot of tips from their coworkers, those of them that had to be educating their children from home, something that they haven't had to do before. So parenting tips, education tips. Now it's going to be, what are we going to do with them for the summer tips? The other thing that you can use as virtual team activities that I would highly recommend, and that's because I am big on education, you know, is just casual learnings that people can do through Zoom. Lunch and learns, absolutely quick, easy. You know, most lunch and learns can be done in an hour. Everybody brings your lunch and you kind of go through whatever topic it is that you want everybody to get at the same time. I've done lunch and learns recently around managing change. I've done lunch and learns around work-life balance, lunch and learns just around communication. So creating those opportunities for learnings with the team. The other thing is TED Talks. You know, go through and pick a TED Talk, or ask your team to recommend a TED Talk, people on the team, and then everybody watch it, and then you get together and discuss it, or watch it together and then discuss it. Book clubs is another one that comes to play here that I've heard some people are doing with their work teams. And then gamification. There's a lot of games out there, electronic, that are video type processing games that you can use, that are fun, that are engaging, that connect to learning in the workplace. And you can Google that and find some things. I am going to post at the end of this webinar, I'm going to post some connections, some links to some of these things. Definitely some icebreakers, team activities, team building activities, and learning activities. The other thing is making sure that for connections that you are doing check-ins, that you're doing regular meetings, that they are scheduled. One thing that people do not have right now is a lot of normal in their life. The more normal that you will provide for them, the easier it's going to be for them. So schedule your meetings regularly so that they know they can count on that. Same thing with your one-on-ones. If before you used to do one-on-ones once a month, consider doing one-on-ones maybe once a week with them, even if it's just quick for half an hour. Knowing that they have access to you for a set period of time every week is really important. I know some managers that are actually doing daily check-ins with their employees. Whatever works for you and whatever you think your employees need, but understand that it's going to be more frequent right now than it used to be in the past. And then encourage your coworkers to connect with one another. Encourage them to take breaks throughout the day and connect with one another. If you can provide a platform for them to do it like Zoom, do that. If not, just encourage them when you get together in team meetings, talk about, you know, so who's been chatting with one another? What have you guys learned? What's going on? Because that really will help to make that connection stronger, and it will maintain the connection that already exists within your team. All right, so if you have any questions about any of this, or you have comments, please put in your comments. One of the things that I really want to know in this one is if there's things you're doing that are working with your team, please share them. Go ahead and type them in, and at the end I'm going to have Karina kind of share with us the things that people are typing in, because I want you to benefit from each other as much as from some of the information that I'm giving you here. All right, so the third section, oh, I want to share this with you. I forgot I had these in here. Okay, so I was on a meeting recently, and I don't know if she is on this training or not, because she was telling me that she might jump on the training, so she knows who she is. But I was on a meeting recently as a participant with someone who shared, when we first went onto the call, she had this up on the screen of the Zoom meeting. And it was hilarious because we all jumped in, we looked at our Zoom names. I was informed that OG in May, that stands for original. I didn't know that. But so my name is Original Essential. Hey, what do you know? But it was just up there, and it just gave people something fun to do when they first were waiting for the meeting to start. And some people were chit-chatting about it. You know, when's your birthday? Oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. So that's one thing, just doing something fun. There's a lot of fun memes out there right now that are up there. Of course, you got to be careful. Some of them probably you want to be careful as a manager. That could be misinterpreted, but something fun. Another thing that I did at a meeting I went to, there was the manager just posted this at the beginning of the meeting. So just something fun, something funny. I love this one, Puerto Vallarta. And then bingo, create a bingo for your team that they can do throughout the meeting. I like this one because, you know, how many of these statements have been made in meetings to see how quickly it takes for someone to get bingo. And then the last one I want to share, also from another meeting I was at, actually the same one that did the wrapper thing. When we got on the call, this was on. And so she just, you know, before we started the meeting, she asked us, so where are you looking at this? Where are you jumping to? Things you can control or things you can't control? What are you thinking about? And then what phrase would you never want to hear again? For me, it is definitely going to be pivot is going to be one of my words that hopefully I will never hear again. And the other one is pandemic. So what are you doing to take care of yourself? So it was great to kind of have something to start the meeting off with and get people thinking before they even began. So that's another thing you can do. Quick connection with people. All right, so now we're going to our third one, and that is commitment. And commitment is a roll of the dice, okay? Because at any given day, you know yourself. On any given day, you're like, woohoo, I get to go to work today. Or, oh my gosh, do I really have to go to work again? So you want to create a level of commitment with your employees. When we talk about commitment, we're talking about that they see their personal value. They see that they have value, personal value to the organization. That's their uniqueness. That's if they call in, something's going to be missing that's going to have to be filled. You need to constantly be reminding them what is going to be gone if you're not here tomorrow. I call it the It's a Wonderful Life syndrome, right? If you were to disappear, poof, off the face of the earth, what's the gap that's going to exist here? That's what you need to constantly be reminding them of. That's their personal value to your organization. The second part that's going to keep them committed is personal connection. We talked about team connection, but personal connection, being personally connected to you. Did you know that the number one reason, according to the Society for Human Resource Management, the number one reason that people leave jobs is because they don't have a relationship with their manager? People stay at a job longer, making less money because of a good relationship with a manager. And they will leave a job making good money if they don't have a good relationship with their manager. By the way, number two, not a good relationship with their coworkers. So personal connection, them connecting to you, them connecting to the organization, feeling a part of that organization, feeling they're valued by that organization. And then the third one is personal purpose. And this is your mission. This is your mission. Hopefully every single person on your team is there because they have a connection to your mission. That is the one thing that nonprofits have over the for-profit companies out there, right? People are there usually because they believe in the mission. So reminding them right now during these times of people being away from coworkers and away from management and away from the mothership, we need to remind them of their personal purpose, their personal connection, and their personal value. The Society for Human Resource Management did a study a couple of years ago on what motivates a person at work. And most of us would think, unless you've been in one of my classes, most of you would think that money is a big motivator for people at work. But the truth is that money ranks 18 on what motivates people at work. The number one and number two things that motivate people at work, number two, feeling the work they're doing has value. And number one, feeling that they are valued. That's what we're talking about here. That's what we're talking about here. Getting them committed to what it is that they're doing, coming in every day in the midst of crazy family at home and trying to work in a dining room table with no space. That commitment comes from feeling the work they're doing has value and feeling that they're valued. And that's really what we're talking about with these three things. So what can you do to create and instill and increase that commitment on their part? First thing, ask them to share successes. I'm not talking about the successes that are going to make the monthly report or the weekly report. I'm talking about the daily successes that normally if you were in an office, they might say in passing to someone, oh, I finally got the spreadsheet done. But nobody's there to listen to them now at home. So what are just some successes they had during the day? That's a great way to start a meeting sometime. Have everybody share successes. The second thing, have them share something they take pride in or a challenge they overcame over the last day or two when it comes to work. You know, maybe they've been trying to reach someone and they finally heard back from them. Those are the kinds of things that you normally wouldn't expect them to send you an email about it, but having them share successes with you will help them feel valued by you. Provide resources for them. I cannot stress this one enough, especially right now. People need their resources to do their jobs. Be available. You are a resource to them. If you tell them you're going to get back to them by the end of the day, get back to them by the end of the day. Remember, they're sitting there waiting because they don't have a lot of other distractions going on when it comes to work. So you need to be a resource to them and be available to them and follow through. But also you need to ensure that they have access to all the resources that they need to do their job. I was talking with someone yesterday and she said, I'm waiting on 2 things that I can't get to because we have them in the warehouse and my manager's trying to see if we can get them and blah, 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 blah. And I could see her frustration with a project that she's working on that could be pretty quickly finished if she only had these resources that normally would be right at the tip of her hand if she was in the office. So look to make sure that they have the resources. If the resources is a connection with someone else that you can connect them to, make that connection for them because it's not going to be as easy for them without the access to things they might have at the office. And then the third way that you can increase their commitment by making them feel valued is encourage learning from them. This is an opportune time for them to go and do some professional development learning. You know, they have time now, they can do it. A lot of them could do it from home virtually. So encourage professional development learning, even learning around personal interest. At the end of this, I'm going to post some links for some learning locations that you can connect people to virtually. Did you know that there is a link out there where the Ivy League universities in this country are offering free classes right now to people that want to go? There's 500 free classes that people can register for and attend and say, I took this class at Harvard. I mean, classes on things that are just personal interest things, music theory or history, whatever, but things that might interest them. But there's also some very practical things that are in that around technology and around communication. So I'm going to put that link out there for you too. Encourage them to learn during this time. Whatever they learn and whatever they focus on is only going to enhance them and make them more valuable to you when they come back into the workplace face to face. And then of course, this might be a good time for some cross training. This is another way to connect people with their coworkers. This might be a good time for 2 people to jump on Zoom and learn each other, maybe a report that one of them does that you want the other one to learn. So take advantage of this time to do some cross training too. So that really covers the 3 main areas that I wanted to talk about that will help you motivate, help you engage your employees a little more when we talk about the communication, focusing on communication, focusing on the connection that needs to be strengthened and continued within your team, and then focusing on their individual personal commitment to the job so that they're motivated to come in and do the work every morning, even when they're feeling isolated. The next thing I want to talk about is just how we can help them transition through daily change. And this one I really just did some research about, and I thought I'll put up 5 or 6 things we can focus on, because I know right now many of you are looking at maybe thinking, what do we need to do to open up our place for people to be able to come back to work? Some of you are thinking about, we need to start looking at maybe bringing some people in. I was talking with a neighbor the other day, and she works at a bank, and she said, right now there's 3 or 4 of us that have been working out of the bank, but they're thinking about next week letting in some more employees, because in 3 weeks we're going to start letting in some of our customers 2 or 3 at a time, and that's going to kind of change the dynamics. So as you're looking at transitioning into a next phase, what do you need to do to make sure your employee stays motivated and connected? And let me tell you, this is where change rises anxiety in people. It raises a lot of anxiety. So you want to minimize that as much as possible. Well, let me tell you, I thought I would look for 3 or 4 things to point out. I found so many that it was hard for me to narrow it down to, are you ready? 18. So I am going to go through these 18 very quickly because I think they kind of speak for themselves, but I just want to put it in your head to be thinking about this, okay? Communicate, communicate, communicate. Whatever you're thinking about doing, let them know as soon as possible, because if not, the rumors will start and it will be, they're going to be thinking something. Why don't we have them thinking the facts, right? Don't expect things to go back to how they were. They are not going to go back to how they were. Some of you are going back to a smaller workforce. Some of you I know have had to furlough people. Some of you have had people have to leave because of situations going on in their lives. So their coworkers may look different. The workspace is going to look different. The processes and the way we work is going to look different. Your funders are going to be different. I mean, there are so many things that have changed. So don't expect things to just be able to fall back in. Oh, we'll be back in the office tomorrow. It'll be good. Plan for change. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with a manager saying, I don't know, as long as it's followed with, I'm going to find out. Let me see what I can find out. I'll let you know what I find out. You just need to be transparent as possible with them. Plan phase scenarios for returning to your workplace. Think about different options that might happen. I know some of you are working this already with your boards. Some of you, you're having these discussions with your managers, but we need to constantly be thinking about different situations because no one in your workplace knows how a change is going to affect everyone in the workplace. So you need to be discussing these changes because you may not realize, oh, this makes sense in this department, but how is it going to affect these people over here? So take it slow. Don't be afraid to take it slow. You'd rather do it right and slow than have to back up because you didn't consider something. Rethink your physical setup. This stands to reason. The 6-foot rule is going to be something that's going to be around for a little while. How is that going to affect your physical setup at work? You might have to rearrange the way things are set up. Now, pay attention. When you reset up, that means that people's interactions and traffic patterns are going to change too. So think about that throughout the day. Everyone's level of comfort is not the same. Allow for this. You're going to have some people that are going to be like, nope, I'm really not comfortable yet being around people. You're going to have to balance some of that, and it's okay, but you need to let people feel comfortable enough to tell you. Think creatively. Maybe shift work or flex hours will work with your employees. Clearly define and communicate your office entry procedures. Are we going to take temps? If we're going to take temps, what are we going to do with that information? Who is going to know that information? Some of this you might need to have conversations with your HR department about, because there are some things that legally you have to cover yourself for. You can't just be taking people's temps and let everybody know what people's temps are. That's a health issue. And technically, health issues are covered under HIPAA protection. So these are procedures, entry procedures back into the office that we need to be in communication with them. This is what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to get done. Few more. Reconfigure your shared spaces and resources. We think about our workspaces, but what about the shared spaces? The break room, the restrooms, the copier, the coffee machine. Who's going to be responsible for cleaning off that copier after everybody uses it if that's something that has to be done? So think about your shared spaces and your resources. Provide updated seating charts to your people so that they're going to be able to come back a little more efficiently, expecting to know they're not spending their first few days trying to find where people are if you have a bigger office. Consider designating isolation rooms. Maybe there might be a space where you can put that people can kind of wipe and clean and they can go in there to be by themselves if they need to be. Plan and communicate your cleaning regimes to the staff. Support your employees' mental health. Hopefully that's something you've been doing all along. I've been talking to many agencies that have been putting out information about their EAP systems to their employees already. Maintain updated policies and procedures. These are going to be constantly changing. Keep them up to date and keep them in the hands of your employees, especially the ones that are affected by them. Revise your employees' goals, priorities, job descriptions. That's the one-on-ones that you're doing with your employees. The more defined you make their role, the easier it's going to be for them to work. So define their goals, define their priorities, define their job, and then communicate, communicate, communicate. All right. So this is really what I had for you today. I hope that this has been information that has helped you. The last thing I just want to mention real quickly is just something I do when I do change management training that I want to toss out to you, is that when you are preparing for change or bringing your employees, your team into change as a manager, you want to make sure that you're communicating the change throughout. You want to make sure that you are offering your support, you're offering resources, you're offering an opportunity for them to ask questions or concerns that they have, and even rumor control. You want to make sure that you have a place for that to go. Include them in the decisions that affect them. They know their jobs better than you do in most cases. Evaluate and adjust. Every time a change happens, go back and see, is this working? Is this something we need to adjust? And include them in that decision too. And then celebrate your success. You know, make sure that you're letting people, praising people for the help they're giving you, for the success that you're having. Even this has been tough for all of us. I really appreciate you hanging in there. But before you do any of this, and if you have been in a change management class that I've done, you know this part. Before you do any of this, something that you need to consider, you need to start with what's not changing. Change is uncomfortable for everybody. What you need to do is give them a foundation that they can stand on so they're ready for the change. And that is what's not changing. So start with what's not going to change so they know what they can count on. They know what they can count on. And then you can start introducing the change to them. All right. So I promised you some resources. There are two, and this is going to be in the handout that you can access after class, I think, is when you're going to be able to access it. There's two really good articles. One is from the University of Pittsburgh. The second one is from a group called the Cadmus Group. Really good tools for that reentry process for supervisors and management to think about with their companies and with their employees. Some of the information I shared here came from some of those. So I went ahead and supplied the links. Training and learning resources. There's a great handout kind of thing from Snack Nation, 52 virtual team building activities. There's some real fun ones in there. And then the free online Ivy League classes to encourage people for personal learning. The link is right there. And then the last two, obviously, is my organization. Please feel free to contact me at any time if I can be of support to you. And NLC, I know, is always there for us anytime that we need them. So all of this is going to be available to you in the handout, so you don't have to necessarily be jotting down those wonderful links. But I did want to give you that opportunity. So Karina, if you want to go take it away and see if we have any questions.
I don't see any questions in the
Oh,
chat
good.
yet. If anybody has any questions, please type them.
Or comments. I would love to hear any things you guys are doing in your companies that cover some of the things we've talked about. I'm always open to hearing great ideas so I can share them with people.
So while we wait for people to chime in. Okay, it looks like we've got a question from Jessica. Any tips for virtually onboarding new hires?
Yes, actually, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who had her first onboarding experience with a new hire this past week, and she was patting herself on the back because she did such a great job. Absolutely. One of the keys is, number one, obviously, that you do it in a place where you can see them. Have pictures as much as you can. Put in pictures of the team, people they'll be working with, the things that your team does. You know, a lot of you have organizations that you're collecting. You tell stories. Use those stories in the onboarding. And in a virtual onboarding, it's really easy to do that, to bring it onto it. Virtually, you can bring in people from different places. Bring in people from other departments to come in and talk a little bit about their department is a great way. You might not be able to do that in a live onboarding, but in a virtual onboarding, you definitely can. And they can just pop in for a few minutes, talk about their departments, answer questions, or go on. So think outside the box a little when it comes to virtual onboarding. Anything
If you have
else?
any questions, we don't have anything yet. I have a question that came up for me earlier in the presentation, and that it was on like staff meetings and maintaining that connection. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the challenge in maintaining that connection and adding meetings where they may not have been before, and managing the workload. So the workload might be higher now because of the additional, whatever additional things
Right.
the virtual added,
Well,
and then additional pressure to stay connected.
right. No, I will tell you that you are probably going to need more meetings. And I know that the two words more and meetings together to any manager makes you cringe, but you need to allow yourself to have more meetings. You might, though, need to really evaluate what is essential, and that's another word that we're using a lot these days. But when it comes to the work, what is essential work that we really need to cover in the meeting, and what are things that we could kind of probably wait on, that you might be able to cover one-on-one with people. So really evaluate the effectiveness of the meeting. I think will help you a lot to make those meetings. And I'm hoping that maybe one of the things that comes out of this is that we learn how to do better meetings. Because I know that a lot of times we don't run effective meetings anyway, because a lot of stuff goes on in meetings that we don't follow up on, and virtual meetings make us be a little more efficient and effective anyway. So, but definitely I think you need to connect with people more often, but maybe not as long, if that helps you a little.
We have a couple of comments that I'll just read aloud so that we can capture them in the recording. From Jacqueline, she says, we have a Facebook for work with a pet spotting group that many people love. There are all sorts of groups so people can connect virtually.
Yep.
We also have an email chat group called Light Chatter where people can chat throughout the day.
I love that. I love that. And I have to say this, when you said pet group, Jessica Muroff is one of my friends, and she's does a lot at the United Way. And, you know, one of the things she does is she checks in at the beginning of her meetings. She was sharing on Facebook that she checks in at the beginnings of her meetings with the 3 H's. What are you hoping? Are you hurting in any way? Hoping, happy, and hard are her 3 H's. So how can we help you? And then the other thing is, she had a pet thing at a meeting. She told everyone to bring their pet, and she brought her snake. I mean, there's a picture on Facebook of her holding this python. Okay. So definitely pets is a great thing to do. All right. What's another one? I'm seeing more ideas
Sure,
here.
we have another comment from Kate that says, we have a channel on Teams for employee engagement that asks fun questions every day.
That's awesome. I love that. Another way to connect with people. And then people are thinking, what can I ask? What can I ask?
I think that is it for the chat box.
So, yeah. Oh, I do see Susan. I think it's important to respect people's private time. It's tempting to call your team for an answer on something that you're working on after hours. Not good. I absolutely agree with that. I think that different people don't mind, depending on what is comfortable for you. You know, I am by myself, I'm isolated alone. And so I have had times off hours that people that I work with and I'm working with on different projects and stuff will connect with me after hours. But I think the key here is to connect with your coworker and say, what time would be good for you? Let's figure out a time. Whereas before we might just call them or pop in on them. Scheduled time this time, because you don't know what is going on at people's homes. But I love that. Definitely you want to respect people's private time. And the other thing we need to consider from an HR perspective, and I have to say this for managers, is that if they are hourly employees, we cannot be expecting them to work virtually all the time like a lot of our salaried employees will be doing. So Teams for employees engagement, fun questions. Yeah, I saw that. That was one you mentioned. Good. Well, thank you so much. I hope that you all have been able to pull some good information here. One of the mantras that I live by is practical information is only practical if it's practiced. So my goal is always to share practical information, but I want to make sure that it's something that is workable for you. So I'd love to hear from you, some of the things you all are doing. You have my email. Please feel free to contact me at any time. And Charlie, Karina, thank you so much for the opportunity to do this.
Thank you, Margarita, for sharing this incredibly informative and timely presentation. Thank you to everyone that participated. Please reach out to us if you have any questions, and keep your eyes out for any upcoming webinars and upcoming virtual trainings.